Hey Sid, it's 8 a.m. Are you ready to start?
For sure, thanks. Clement, who's not in the call, asks, as GitLab grows as a company, influence and popularity, what would you do if you were invited to the White House to meet the president in light of how we at GitLab tend to not associate with any politics? I think not going while invited might also be a political statement. And I prefer not to answer any hypotheticals, sounding like a proper politician here. Suri asks to verbalize her question. What is your position on wearing socks with sandals? That's a great question. I'm personally not a fan of that. I won't do it, but I do think shoes are too hot. It's like weird. Like we have this body part which we kind of fit into something. Like people have like ingrown toenails and stuff like that. It's just shoes are probably not healthy. And I think we should be accepting of socks with sandals in a work setting. Gene, you want to verbalize your question?
Hi, yes. So apart from the challenges coming with the hypergrowth that we're experiencing, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night with regards to GitLab? And as a follow-up, what are you doing about that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You wouldn't believe it, I get that question more often. So we now have a nice new page. You can find it if you Google GitLab biggest risks. It has a couple of options. And the number one thing I worry about is lowering the hiring bar, as we are more than doubling every year in the number of people. There's a lot of pressure to hire fast. And if that means accepting hires who are less than stellar, who are not like improving the team, that will quickly be very detrimental to the company. So it's something I worry about and think about a lot. And you can find some of the things I think about doing there. Standard interview structures, review the interview scores of new hires, take action on underperformance quicker, make that more of a conversation between managers and reports, do samples of new hires, compare the external titles, and conduct bar raiser interviews. Those are things that aren't consistently happening, so we need to spend more time on that, which is a good reminder to make this part of our e-group conversation. There's also a bunch of other worries, and I can tell you one great thing is that I don't lie awake about that. In fact, I remember a dream I had last night, and it was M&Ms introduced a blockchain, and the transaction cost was 1 M&M. Now, I don't think that's super feasible, but probably too much reading about Facebook, their new blockchain. Sarah, you want to verbalize your question?
I didn't see her in the call.
Cool. I'll read it. What are you personally doing on a daily, weekly basis to educate yourself about the experiences of underrepresented and marginalized people in our industry? Well, luckily on Twitter, I follow a lot of people who also care about that. So I get to see some examples. I think at GitLab, one thing that is kind of not where it should be is that we're not hiring junior developers. I would love for us to do that because we can find more kind of, that's kind of a missing step in a career ladder, and there's not a lot of companies doing that. I think right now we do not have the proper kind of education program for junior developers. I also think it's just very hard if you scale really fast. Like suppose someone takes 2 years of training. At 2 years, only like, suppose we retain 100% of our people. If you more than double, it's only 25% of who you have in 2 years. So it's harder at hypergrowth. I think about a lot, no solutions yet. I think one common problem is that there is good education available to get into the industry, but I think only very few people can take significant time off to join the industry. I think the best education value for money-wise right now is Lambda School. It's 9 months. You can pay on an income share agreement, pay afterwards, but it's 9 months, and very people can forgo income for 9 months. So I personally basically donated $1 million to Lambda School in order for them to explore a stipend. And they made a first step recently where they at least have a stipend if they, at the end of the studies, where they'll pay you to keep searching for a job. What they found is kind of people went to the program, were close to a job, didn't quite get it, and then they needed money, so they started working again, and they kind of, you lose your skills, you don't have time to interview. I thought that was a great first step. There should be an article about that coming out soon from me. Who wants to verbalize Suri her question?
I'll do it, but I always struggle with that one word in a question, so please excuse if I mess it up. If there was a zombie apocalypse and you had to buddy up with one member of the E team to survive, who would it be and why?
That's a good question. I don't really know, but I think the rest of the E team should have me pretty high on their radar because most of them are in the Bay Area, and together with two other couples, we have a boat, which I think is a very useful way to escape from the zombies. Derek, you want to verbalize your question or questions?
Wasn't seeing Derek on the call either.
Cool. Who wants to do the honors?
Yeah, you can go ahead and verbalize it. What percentage of your time is proactive versus reactive? And is time boxing crucial to your day-to-day workflow?
Let's take them one by one. Proactive versus reactive. I think much more of my time is kind of planned meetings, which doesn't necessarily make it reactive, but it's more kind of interrupt driven. So someone else puts something on the calendar or someone else sends a Slack message and you respond to that. I still think I'm kind of driving as much as I'd like. I think if you talk to my reports, sometimes they're a bit like, oh, I wish Sid would like put fewer things on our agenda. But it's a balance, and it's a struggle to kind of make sure we, on one hand, we do strategic things together, but on the other hand, we also quickly roll something out if it's important, like dealing with underperformance. Or today I've been focusing on our KPI page, our key performance indicators, and making sure they're accurately reflected everywhere. Make sure that every job family in the company has one or more performance indicators. Second one was, is time boxing crucial for your day-to-day workflow? Yes, very much. I tend to have short meetings, mostly 25 minutes, and that's crucial. Almost everyone I talk to is interesting, and we could talk for 3 hours if allowed the time. And then also, if you have a meeting where you don't need to fill the entire meeting, that's great. Everyone has email or other things to go back to. So it's essential. Want to verbalize the last part, Trevor? Oh, you're muted, Trevor.
Thank you. Do any other thoughts come to mind regarding time allotment for tasks or goals?
Yeah, I have too little kind of executive time. My mentor, Dan Levin, says. So I tend to kind of be dependent on other people to do things. I'm now pushing some tasks over to the CEO shadows who've been doing an amazing job, but I'm looking forward to having a chief of staff to kind of give these things to that kind of requires 2 hours of deep thinking. And then I tend to take vacation, and that helps with the deep thinking. Like I came back from holiday 1.5 weeks ago or something, and I updated our strategic goals for 2023. So I think that's my kind of deep thinking time. Mark Berger, you want to verbalize your question?
How do you think the culture's changed in the last year or two?
I would say I take culture as our values, and I think they've been getting stronger, as in they're better written down. If you probably look at the values page 2 years ago and now, there's a lot more examples. There's a lot more fidelity to it. And I think people are better aware of our values. I think they're more frequently the subject of conversation. New people are more aware of them. So I think in GitLab, instead of kind of our values getting diluted over time, because we're more than doubling every year. So if you have to do it like person to person, you get diluted like a game of telephone. I think with us, they've been getting stronger. But that might be wishful thinking. What do you think, Mark?
I think there's a difference between our values and culture. Our values, I think, are super strong. I think, we hire for people as well. But I think culture is also the personality of the company outside of being ethical and living our right. And so as we grow, it's a difference between being, part of a smaller team, that team growing, multiple teams, instead of being in a classroom, you're in the whole university, right? So that culture changes over time as you scale, certainly to where we are and where we're going, and changes over time.
Yep, for sure. I try to keep the word culture limited to the values if I can, because otherwise it's like the person is not a culture fit. Why? Because I don't like to hang out with them. Well, that's not part of our culture. So that's not part of our values. But I hear what you're saying, and for sure we're getting bigger. We're getting more specialized. So as you get bigger, you'll scope down kind of the people you interact with to parts of the company instead of the entire company. Now, we should really try very hard to keep that cross-functional, to make sure that if you have an opportunity to go to dinner, that it's not just people from your function. If you're in support, not just support people, etc. That's why we do the breakout calls. That's why we do the coffee chats, to kind of stimulate having cross-functional connections, because otherwise that will break down. And as we get bigger, you will get more specialization. So people that had a very broad array of things to do, they say, I'm a lucky guy. I get to do like everything as the CEO, although I get less and less and on a higher level, but I at least have all the functions and that oversight, while the rest of the company is getting more and more specialized. And that's one of the reasons for the CEO Shadow program, to make sure that people have an overview of the entire company. Other Mark, the IBM deal, can you verbalize?
Yep. I wonder what your take is. I mean, it's really validating open source, and just want to get your take on it.
Yeah, well, first of all, good for IBM. I think Red Hat is a great company. They've had kind of a unique business model, as in that they didn't have any proprietary code. They open sourced everything they acquired, and they made that work really well. But it might be a unique business model where Red Hat basically said, well, all the open source you use, we will help maintain that for you. That worked really well up to a certain point, and you now see the rise of kind of cost companies, commercial open source software companies. But I think that IBM sees the transition from proprietary systems. They're still selling a lot of like, what is it called, iPower, or AIX, Alt360, Z series. They're seeing the transition from that to like open source Linux, and I think that's Red Hat is going to be a great asset for them to stimulate that move at their customers. Also, I think Red Hat has been very customer centric with like embedded engineers everywhere, and I think that could serve as an example to us, where we help our customers embrace DevOps and we become the go-to person in an organization to get great DevOps advice. Matt, you want to verbalize your question? Matt, if you're talking, we can't hear you. The question is about automotive and requirements management. So I want to share my screen. Something I care a lot about. So if you click here on requirements management, there should be a vision here. Replace with this, but not before I think I articulated something. I think we can have a very first simple iteration of requirements management. And it's something I've seen happening with the customers made for themselves. What you want to do in requirements management is make sure that when someone has a requirement, that you're sure that the software you shipped actually meets that requirement. And we know that the only great way to test software is to make an automated test. So we basically have to link an issue that contains the requirement to a software test to making sure that the final software meets that test. What we could do is basically in the test suite, add the issue number as like a non-code comment or some other way, and then show the end user an overview of all their requirements, so all their issues, all the ones that had a test case, and can be multiple test cases for one issue, and show like whether a certain build of the software, whether that test was green or red, whether that was met, so that they can state with certainty, this build of the software meets all the requirements we've defined. And I think it's, although not easy, it's relatively doable. And I think that will be a great first iteration. Also love if someone would cut out this part of the recording and add it to the new vision. John, are you a panelist? Can you articulate your question?
I believe I am. So I wanted to ask, what is a belief that you held about GitLab that recently changed, and what caused you to change your mind?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good question. I think that it's maybe not something that recently changed, but something that's becoming clearer and clearer over time is that we shouldn't be in the platform as a service business. I always kind of was intrigued by the idea of Heroku and kind of running customer workloads. But I think if we are the supplier of compute, I don't think that's a great business to be in, because you're kind of competing with the hyperclouds, you're competing with data centers people already paid for. So I think much rather be in enabling using things than selling it ourselves. Having said that, we do kind of allow people to pay for CI testing and things like that. But I think we should always like allow people to bring their own runners, bring their own Kubernetes clusters. And we don't want to be kind of gating people in that. And we don't want our business model to be margin on top of someone else's infrastructure. Usha, you want to articulate your question?
Well, just a quick question. You're the CEO of a company, and the company is growing really, really big now. So just wanted to know, how do you manage your stress? Do you meditate, or what do you do? Yeah,
thanks. I did a bit of meditation. I thought it didn't help me, so I thought, am I doing this right? And I bought a headband. I think it was the Muse 2, which is amazing. Turns out, according to the headband, I was doing it right. It just doesn't help me very much. We had a theory. This is not medical advice. I'm not your doctor. We had a theory with a friend that maybe if you have a lot of things on your mind at any time, meditation really helps to kind of clear your mind. I'm a very single-threaded, so I only can think about one thing at one time. So it didn't help me. What helps me is making sure I stop the day at a certain point. So I want to go to the gym in the morning. I tend to get up at 6 and go to the gym, and I want to stop working at a certain point. Now I'm on the West Coast, which is great because there's not a lot of people to the west of me. It's at 6 o'clock. I call it a day. I tend to have dinners that are company themed, but I tend to not do a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Corina, you want to articulate your question? I'll read it for her. Do you think it would be a concern that as we expand GitLab capability? Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Sid. Yes, do you think it would be a concern that as we expand our GitLab capabilities to become more user-friendly for operations personas, that we could possibly disrupt or detract from the developer experience and our user growth?
Yes, I'm very worried about that. It's not on the page of biggest risks, but it should almost be. But I'm also very encouraged what we have done so far. We did some user testing recently, and our navigation was regarded better as competitors like GitHub. It is more consistent. So on one hand, we're able to pack a lot more a lot more functionality into a single app. And on the other hand, even for narrow use case, we're able to have a better interface. So I think our UX team has done an amazing job there. And I have faith that we can continue that.
Thank you.
Michael, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. I was just curious in regards to GitLab's tuition reimbursement program. What skill sets, other than pure engineering roles, do you feel are most in need for our company and for the industry over the next 3 to 5 years, such as data science, and just, would love some kind of direction as far as where you see we're in need?
Yeah, I think data science, ML, AI, those are going to be useful skills anyway. I still think like programming is a very good step up in your career. I also think that for us, growth is going to be important. And I think that I wouldn't know what education to recommend there, because it's very much something you learn on a job, but I'm sure that by now some good education and courses have sprung up. And I think it's, well, I don't have to tell you, but it's like being in sales. If you're good at selling, you'll always be very employable. Growth is kind of the engineering way of selling, which I think is going to keep growing very, very fast. Priyanka, you want to verbalize your question?
Yes, thank you. How close are we to hiring a chief of staff, and if you would like more referrals?
Yeah, we're not close at all. I declined the first 2 candidates. They didn't even meet the requirements. So we did a reset. April's on it now. But requirements are like referrals would be great, but make sure they meet the requirements. So we've done either strategy consulting or important role in a fast growing startup, or some early venture capital, but we want extremely talented people. So if they meet the requirements, then yes, very much encourage more referrals.
Got it,
Dee,
thanks.
Thank you for the question. Do you want to verbalize your question? Priyanka, you want to verbalize your? Yes.
Do you see another Meltano-like project spinning up in the next year or 18 months? And if so, in what spaces are interesting to you?
No, yeah, you see it when you see it, but no plans right now. We could do it, but there's not something where we have to do. We'll only do it if we think it's just, if you think it's like, it's ridiculous that no one has done this before. That's the signal we should start something. IP, you want to verbalize yours?
I think Dee was just muted when she was verbalizing. So do you want to try again, unmuting? Still muted. I'm just going to read a question. What is your position timeline for, I assume, artificial intelligence and machine learning across our single application offering? What are our plans to be HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, there's on the direction page, there's a couple of ML AI examples. So it's over time we'll add ML and AI functionality to GitLab. Then there's also, should people use GitLab for ML, AI, and in what sense should we kind of do a data pipeline, things like that. I spent some time thinking about that. That space is still moving very fast with things like Q+ and Pachyderm. What about our plans to be HIPAA compliant? I assume that there's something to be found there, because that should be a common question. I think right now, people use GitLab a lot in HIPAA, in industries that have to be HIPAA compliant. So, if you install GitLab correctly, then it is HIPAA compliant. But I think there's some more information in our documents, and we also have some compliance people that can help there. And we're out of time for this call, but thanks everyone for the questions. It's encouraging to see that we have more questions than I can answer. And I'll be in the CEO channel. If you want your question answered today, feel free to give me a ping there right after we end. Have a great day.